Joining me now is Peter Daou. He was the digital media strategist for Hillary Clinton, and at the time, not a big fan of Bernie Sanders. Now, a little bit of a change of heart and mind, and we want to talk that through. Peter, welcome back to the Young Turks after a long, long time.
Exactly. Last time was 2010, I believe.
Yeah, I lost track. So yes, so Peter and I go back a while, and then we were progressives in the trenches, working in digital media, working as bloggers for a long, long time. And then we had very significant disagreements during the 2016 campaign when I supported Bernie Sanders in the primaries, and obviously Peter worked for Hillary Clinton. He's written a new book called Digital Civil War: Confronting the Far-Right Menace. Okay, and you also have a different point of view on Bernie Sanders these days. So let's start there and then we'll get into some of the details. What's your new take on Bernie Sanders?
Well, my new take is really just not to have a 2016 take. My focus is on 2020 and what we need to do to win. And what I've been arguing is, and this is for me personally, I'm not telling other people what to do with their feelings and with the frustration from that election, but for me personally, I want to look at Bernie Sanders as one of the front runners in the campaign, and I want to treat him that way and look at what's positive about him. I don't want to tear him down because of frustrations I may have had or disagreements in 2016. So I'm just trying to be forward-looking about it. And he certainly has brought issues that are critically important to me, like inequality that I've been talking about, as you know, for many years. So that's sort of how I'm looking at it. Forward-looking. We got to win in 2020. This matters.
So I'm just going to read you one of course, many possible tweets from back in the day that you wrote, and I'm curious what you think of it now. This is from November 30th of 2016. You wrote, "I'll be crystal clear, Bernie Sanders has absolutely no business determining the course of the Democratic Party after the harm he did to us." Do you still believe that, or do you regret writing that?
I don't regret writing it because, as I've said, in the heat of that battle, Cenk, we were, look, even families, close family members get in very bitter fights. And sometimes even when you're family, you fight more bitterly than with strangers. It was ugly, it went off the rails. It got far more severe than any of us expected. There were agitators coming from the outside making it worse. So my position is, look, it was a fight, and I look back over the past year or two to see what was my role. Was I constructive? Am I being constructive now in trying to look inside myself and see what I can do better? So it's not so much as I regret this tweet or that tweet. I wrote a lot of things. Look, we were throwing punches and punches were being thrown at us. But I need to get past it because for me, it's a personal distraction. I really need to focus on the Republican Party because as far as I'm concerned, the authoritarian streak has gone out of control the past year or so. They've become a lawless, I mean, they've been like this a long time. But the lawlessness is increasing to the point where I fear that we're not going to be able to have these public voices we have 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now if they win in 2020. So, you go over those tweets, they were done in the heat of battle. And they are what they are. They're part of the past in my mind.
So Peter, I understand that, and no one fights back against Republicans like we do, okay? And with fire and brimstone. And we're gonna get to that in a second. But I think in order to get past it, there has to be some sort of reconciliation. And so, there's a couple of things that I know certainly bother Bernie Sanders supporters, and it bothers me too. One is the idea that Bernie Sanders cost Hillary Clinton the election. It's just not supported by facts at all. And so when it is brought up continually to this day, it's hard to get past. And so number one, what's your take on that? And number two, what is it about your former colleagues that they cannot stop saying that, even though statistically, empirically, it's not historically true within context?
Well, look, this is what I've said to my friends who have been Hillary Clinton supporters and what I've said to Bernie Sanders supporters I disagree with. We are never going to resolve those disputes. For every single person who says the election was rigged by the DNC against Bernie, you have a Hillary person saying that's absolutely, outlandish, and it's the exact opposite. For everybody who says that Bernie cost Hillary the election, you'll have a Bernie Sanders supporter saying he was out there campaigning for her, he went to Wisconsin for her, he went all around the country for her. Sometimes you reach a point in a fight, and because we've talked about this, that I grew up in a civil war. I've seen people who were shooting at each other make peace with one another. And it doesn't mean that you forgive and forget necessarily, but you realize for the greater good that those fights are never going to be resolved. So I could get back and forth with you, but I don't know how that's going to be productive. I could argue, he did X amount of damage. You could say, no, he didn't. Or I could say this, or I could say that. But I think these are fights that will never be resolved, frankly. I don't, as I say, for every one argument, there's the exact opposite with the same vehemence and force and conviction. So
yeah, Peter, even to this day, I disagree with that framing because there are facts, there are real facts. Twice as many Hillary Clinton voters backed John McCain over Barack Obama as Bernie Sanders voters backed Trump over Hillary Clinton. So that's a fact. It's a fact. And Hillary Clinton encouraged it by backing Puma. The Puma group was party unity my ass back in 2008. Anyway, but I hear you on not getting back into it, but my main issue, Peter, isn't to relitigate that. We can do that for the rest of the time. My issue is that Bernie Sanders is in the race right now.
Yep.
And what we have is Democrats who will not let it go and continually say things that aren't true about Bernie Sanders to this day. So, I mean, you worked with the Clinton team. You were on the Clinton team. So you're a good person to ask. Why do you think they continue to do that?
Well, just to clarify one thing, I wasn't part of the Clinton team formally in 2016. It was 2008 where I worked for her campaign. 2016, I was on the outside of the campaign. But look, I have had my disputes and arguments recently with the Clinton team, right? Because I've been critical of some of the things the campaign did, and this my coming in, I wrote a piece for The Nation about Bernie Sanders and how he's a front runner and should be treated as such, and we shouldn't try to tear him down. So, as you know, I get it, and you do too. You get it from all sides. If you move in one direction, you get people who are not happy with that. You go the other direction, people not happy with that. But I think right now, you're asking the right question. What do we do right now? Bernie Sanders is an important candidate in this race, brings very important issues to this race. And as I said, again, in my Nation piece, I haven't endorsed him. In fact, I'm looking pretty closely at Elizabeth Warren because I think she's running an excellent campaign. This is not about asking anybody to only back Bernie Sanders, but sure as hell, I'm not going to support people saying never Bernie. We can't afford a never right now. Never anybody. We have to all come together to defeat the menace that we're facing. So yes, to your point, absolutely, I could categorically reject the notion that we should, destroy his candidacy because we just don't like him from 2016. Others can do that, and I strongly encourage them not to because I think it would be a terrible mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I find the idea of never anything to be borderline hilarious. I mean, never Klobuchar. Really? How about against Trump? How about against Ted Cruz? How about against Hitler? Okay, right. What do you mean never Klobuchar? I mean, not that exists because nobody really cares about Klobuchar. But
I don't think that one. But yeah.
Yeah. But do you see that there is a disparity here? That while, for example, I was called Bernie Bro, I don't know, 1.2 million times or 12 million times. I don't know how many times I was called that. But I turned around and said Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump is a no-brainer, biggest no-brainer I've ever seen, because one side literally has no brain. Okay, and so and I think that I'm proud of that. I was right about. I think I was right in the primary. I think I was right in the general election. And I'm not going to back down from anybody on that. Now, having said that, to this day, you still have folks in Washington who say that's right, unity, never attack Biden or Buttigieg or Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris. But they do not abide by the same rules for Sanders. They go, oh no, unity for my guys, but for your guy, I'm gonna have the Washington Post write 28 op-eds against him every single day. I'm gonna have every pundit on television tell us how unrealistic and terrible he is and how he can't win. And what? What do you mean? So when we see that, Peter, it's maddening. And my question is not does it exist? You already acknowledged that it does. My question is why? You were in those rooms. It's not just 2016. There's something about Bernie Sanders that drives the establishment nuts. What is it?
Oh, well, I'm going to answer a very particular part of your question because I think it's the key one, certainly from my perspective. Bernie Sanders threatens the establishment, and when I say the establishment, I want to be very specific. I think people really took umbrage that organizations like Planned Parenthood were being lumped with the establishment, and they're not. They're fighting for a very, very important issue for women's freedom of choice. However, the Democratic establishment is certainly threatened by Bernie Sanders. The media establishment is threatened by Bernie Sanders, and not him personally. It's what he represents and the movement behind him. And I understand that. Look, you know, because I remember sitting down with you in Soho, in New York in 2001, 2002, talking about the problems with the Democratic Party on the Patriot Act, on the Iraq War, always caving to Republicans. So that is still a problem, an even worse problem right now. Look at impeachment, look at Kavanaugh, just caving to Republicans. So the Beltway establishment, which I was in the belly of that beast when I worked for 2 campaigns, gives me unlimited, endless frustration for 20 years now. I believe that establishment, sort of the Beltway media political establishment, is definitely threatened by the movement he generates and the excitement. So I'm with you on that. I definitely see that, but I think we need to be specific on whose establishment. Here's the thing, Cenk. I'm not in a position to tell John Lewis, for example, that I judge him. You know, AOC, Maxine Waters. There are some amazing Democrats who have given their life to this country, and I'm not going to sit here and say the entire Democratic Party is equal to the Republicans. I don't like false equivalence. Democrats are far better, but the party leadership needs to change, and I've said that for a long time, and I think we're probably on the same page with that.
Yeah, well, I have a theory that does not sit well with Washington. I think the Democratic Party, and I totally agree with you that it's not all of it. I very often say on the show, it's 99% of the Republican Party. Walter Jones is a terribly wrong right winger, but he's an honest guy that and doesn't believe that money should control politics. He's one of the most conservative guys in Congress, but he's at least honest. So 99% of the Republican Party, but about 80% of the Democratic Party. I don't think it's that complicated. They take money from corporate donors and they serve corporate donors. And so when Bernie Sanders comes along and says, we're not gonna do that anymore, they think that their gravy train's about to end. So to them, that's an existential threat. Whereas Nancy Pelosi admitted, well, under Donald Trump, we've raised more money, not less. And then she turns around and says, I don't wanna impeach. Gee, I wonder why. So I think that they are paid to lose. They're paid to be weak. I don't think it's conscious. Don't get me wrong. It's not a conspiracy, but I think it's subconscious. What do you think?
You know, I think a lot about this. I think a lot about the motives, and you know, I don't really know the answer. As I say, I worked in the Beltway. And I've seen a lot of these people, and many mean well, and others you don't really know what they're up to. But the end result is failure. You know, when 20 years ago when I got into politics, things are far worse than they were then. I mean, you remember Free Republic and places like that. The Breitbart and Free Republic comment sections, which were fringe at the time, are now in the White House running the country and running, you know, stacking the judiciary. I mean, this is terrifying to me. I look at my own work as an activist and ask, have I failed? What have I done wrong? And maybe I haven't been hard enough on the Democratic Party because it's the only institution we have to fight these radical extremist Republicans. So look, you know, you may be right, you may be wrong, you may be right about some people. Certainly money is a huge influence in politics and affects people's decisions. So I'm not going to contest what you're saying. I just don't know if that's what it is in every case. But the end result is they're failing.
Well, that we 100% agree on. So the book is Digital Civil War, Confronting the Far-Right Menace. And then in the book, you talk about how you're concerned if the Democrats understand what's happening on the internet. Well, I have a conclusion on that. They most certainly do not. And I believe that the Democrats, in fact, have a disdain for the internet. They think that TV and the New York Times is legitimate, but anything that happens online is not legitimate. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the liberal media myth, right? That the New York Times, Washington Post, and the major outlets, CNN, are all liberal, is exactly how the conservative, and it's not really conservative, it's right-wing extremist. I don't want to even give them that it's conservative. Right-wing media infrastructure functions. So yes, there's this huge liberal media, and we're just the antidote to that. And that is sort of how they create an excuse for the propaganda that they spew. But the fact is, you're right. I mean, Democrats buy into it, right? And that's extremely dangerous, because if you're accepting that the mainstream, or really it's corporate media, is liberal, you are really accepting a right-wing talking point, and you're helping a right-wing frame. And that's why progressive media is never really supported. This, as you know, has been a problem for the 2 decades I've been in politics. Nobody supports progressive media, but you have billionaires and oligarchs funding right-wing media and funding think tanks to feed them talking points. So they have a coherent, powerful media infrastructure to deliver their message. And the Democratic Party and pundits and strategists just buy into it and don't realize how they're being conned, essentially.
Yeah, I think that there's two components to that. One is that the Democratic donors are not going to fund progressive media because they're not progressive. They are economically conservative. They're good folks on social issues. They believe that black people should have the same rights, gay people should have the same rights. But on economic issues, they largely agree with the Republican establishment. So why would they fund media such as ourselves or anyone else to say things like we should raise taxes on the rich and we should have Medicare for all? They're never going to fund that because they're not on our side. So that's point one. We don't even need to debate that. That's a fact. Okay, so, and it's evident in what they have done, their actions, their donations, etc. But there's, I think, another side to it as well, which is pettiness. Look, here, I'll give you a specific example related to us. For us, it's not personal, but I felt like with the Clinton campaign, it was. So, and it's a matter of control too. So the Clinton team, I thought, controlled a lot of what happened on television. They didn't in a lot of cases, and the obsession with the emails was preposterous, and we can go on. I'm not saying that TV was easy on Hillary Clinton, but the Clinton team did seem to give notes to MSNBC. That seemed pretty clear. I've talked to an MSNBC reporter saying that they would get notes after every time he criticized the Clinton campaign. And then we did not back Hillary Clinton during the primary. And then they told us in the general election that basically we will not support you in any way, shape, or form as payback. So there'll be no, folks backing, surrogates backing Hillary Clinton going on your program, and there'll be no advertisements on your program. I said, okay, have it your way, but you're running for president and you're running against Donald Trump. You might not want to take those chances, but they took those chances, and we all, I don't mean the Young Turks, we as the country paid a heavy, heavy price for that. Did you see things like that during 2016?
Well, look, a few weeks ago, I lobbed a criticism at Hillary's campaign team, and a couple of her staffers just went nuts on me. It's like vicious insult just out of nowhere. And I'm thinking to myself, look, guys, you got to take criticism for what happened in 2016. But look, I've said this. This sort of reaching out, trying to build bridges and not treat Bernie Sanders the enemy. I'm not going to start trying to pander to one audience by attacking Hillary Clinton or near attend, and I'm not going to start attacking Bernie Sanders to keep certain Hillary Clinton supporters feeling like, oh, you're still on our side. I'm really not trying to play either side. I'm just trying to go for what I think is the right thing to do, which is to try to win. But certainly her media team made mistakes. I think they made significant mistakes in 2015, not understanding how to deal with the media properly. And certainly I was not aware of what you just said, but you can't turn down any media. So that was clearly an unforced error to do that, no matter who you backed in 2016.
Yeah, and I think that is the core of what turned people off. Not that particular story; nobody even knew that story. But the arrogance and the elitism, right? Oh, well, if MSNBC does what they are told, then we will go on there. But otherwise, we will punish you if you don't back us. But that's
right. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Again, campaigns do get. End up in a bubble, right? I've worked for 2 presidential campaigns, and that bubble where you think you're just going to win and you're in charge and you're control and you call the shots is not the right approach to take. It's not an approach I would have taken, but of course I was not part of the campaign in 2016. I wasn't running it in 2008. Progressive media needs to be supported much more than it is right now by Democrats in general, certainly Democratic campaigns. So let's see how 2020 goes.
One of the things I had planned to ask you already, but you started to get to it in your last answer, is how does it feel to be in the wilderness? Because once you step outside the club And even a light criticism of the club will get you into that cold, dark wilderness where all of a sudden not only the outward criticisms, but the whisper campaign will start. Oh, poor Peter Daou. And that slight, subtle disdain that the club loves to do. And so, have you begun to feel that cold winter air?
I get it from all sides. It may be my personality, and because I'm pretty hard hitting. I try not to insult people and get personal, but I'm pretty hard hitting and opinionated about my views. I know I'm self-aware enough to know that I can rub people the wrong way. So 20 years in this in the trenches of politics. I get it from every side, from the right, the left, the center. It just depends on what position I take. So I've learned not to care. And look, there's another thing more directly to your question, because you're asking a very specific question. I want to answer it. I have the experience of working at the very top of presidential politics in America, and it's a rush. To have senators and presidential candidates call you on your cell phone and talk to you and ask your advice is a very heady experience, especially for a guy who was a house music musician, right, in the 90s. But I've reached a point in my life where I just don't. I'm very blunt with you. I don't need the ego stroke, right? I don't care if I'm inside a club or outside a club at this point. I'm just worried for my family, and I'm worried for my friends, and I'm worried for my country. I'm more worried maybe than other people are because I lived in another country during a war. I'm terrified. Like I'm worried about us reaching the point where you and I could not openly have this conversation without. I know we're monitored, right? I mean, this is a surveillance society basically we live in. But I worry about our freedoms being taken away, like the whole classic frogs in boiling water, where our freedoms are eroding right before our eyes, and a lot of people don't seem to notice or have the requisite level of alarm.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely on that. So when you talk about progressive priorities, and I saw that you wrote, well, one of the progressive priorities should be maintaining our system of government and rule of law. I think people are vastly underestimating Trump's fascist tendencies. I think he would end our democracy in a second if he thought it was to his advantage. And people keep assuming that he thinks like they do. He does not. He does not. He thinks only about himself. He's got clinical issues. So last thing then, Peter, if you had to give advice to the Democratic Party, and you do, right? You wrote a book about it. What would be the core of that advice going forward?
Like, the book is Digital Civil War because I think we're in one. And my advice in the book is to stop playing on the far right's turf. On every issue, on climate, we're busy arguing whether climate change actually exists. On guns, should we be arming teachers? On abortion, are Democrats murdering babies? On every issue, on immigration, should we be kidnapping children and caging them in freezers? They detain them in frigid holding cells. The entire national fight or debate or argument is happening on the far right's turf. Democrats, go left, because center is really right at this point. So, this is why I backed AOC so early before everybody jumped on board when she was still in the campaign. I thought, this is somebody willing to speak the progressive language boldly. So I would counsel all Democrats, if I were running campaigns, move left, because you got to pull that conversation back towards common sense. Well,
it is a interesting world, and you never know where things end up. On that, we certainly agree. Go left, go left. And by the way, it's a center-left country. If you kept going left, it'd take you a long time to get to where Americans actually are, and not people in Washington, where Americans are. Look at the polling, look at the facts. Americans are very, very progressive. They very largely agree with AOC. It's not, it shouldn't be that surprising why she's so popular. It's not an accident, it's not random. It's because those positions are deeply popular in the country.
You're right.
All right, Peter Daou, new book is Digital Civil War. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for reaching out.
Pleasure to reconnect.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.